Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys something that I have found very useful and that my clients really love, which is donor advised funds. So there's multiple ways of charitable giving. And in some ways, donor advised funds are similar to a private foundation. But a donor advised fund is much less expensive and much easier to set up while still allowing people to experience the full tax benefits of charitable giving and the ability to be flexible in giving to your favorite charities. So they've become really my favorite giving vehicle to recommend to my clients. A charitable donor advised fund is a vehicle that allows the owner to make grants to charitable organizations, and the donor can enjoy the power of giving without the hassle of worrying about timing, having tax concerns, very, very low expenses, and no obligation for record keeping, because that is done by the charitable trust, as I will explain. As I will describe, it's really easy to set up a donor advised fund and so easy to make charitable gifts. There's an interesting psychological benefit that I have observed when people establish their own donor advised funds. And when I say people, I'm also talking about myself, as well as my clients. I've had this experience. I've set up my own donor advised fund, made a gift to the fund, and as soon as I had done that, I had this feeling of, wow, I have this pile of money set aside only for charitable giving, because once you put money in a donor advised fund, it has to be used to make gifts to charities. So effectively, you now have resources that are just for charitable giving, and that gives you the psychological freedom to make gifts whenever you're inspired to do so. So maybe you're in a meeting and you're hearing about something wonderful that a charity has embarked on. You can just next day go back to your office and request a gift to be sent. If somebody comes and asks you for a donation, you don't have to feel like, well, can I afford it? How much? All this. You already have your money set aside for charitable giving. And it's just a freedom that is really remarkable. And I see this over and over. And when I get feedback from my own clients who've done this, they tell me the same thing, how much they love having this pool of money set aside. So when I set up donor advised funds, I work with Raymond James Charitable Trust. My company is a registered investment advisor. We are our own company. We use Raymond James. We are clients of Raymond James to do processing for us, and also they provide trust services for us. Many investment firms have these kinds of charitable trusts. This is not exclusive to Raymond James. So what I'm going to talk about today can be applied across the board. And also many charities have donor advised funds. However, if you want the option to make gifts to multiple charities from one donor advised fund, I think working with an organization like RJ Charitable Trust or any charitable trust set up through an investment firm is going to make the most sense. A donor advised fund provides the donor with an immediate and full tax deduction for that contribution when they make the contribution. And at the same time, the contribution is going to be invested, which I'll discuss in a moment, And so the original gift over time is going to grow. The donor has the flexibility to request gifts to be made through the fund at any time, and I'll come back to that point. But first, I want to describe how easy it is to set up a donor advised fund and also some basics about how they work. So at RJ Charitable, a new account donor advised fund can be established with a minimum initial contribution of $10,000 in cash or marketable securities. Once that initial contribution is made, the minimum for additional contributions is $500, and the minimum grant that you can give to a charity is $100. So it's very, very accessible for many people, and it's simple and easy to administrate. It doesn't take the donor any time, really. So when establishing a donor advised fund, the donor is going to be asked to give their preferences in 4 areas. 2 of them are initially how they want the money to be invested within the how they want the money to be invested within the options that are offered by the fund. I'll give you an example in a minute. And then who's going to make those decisions about what charities are going to be gifted to. And usually it's the donor that's going to do that. But there are people who actually don't want to make those decisions themselves. And there's an option that's really good if you run into somebody who doesn't really want to be responsible for making those decisions. And then over time, which charities will ultimately receive grants from the fund, that's going to be either decided by the donor, like I just said, or the Raymond James Charitable can do it for the donor with certain guidance. And finally, the 4th thing, and this is going to be requested at the time of requesting a gift, is just how much is going to be given to each charity. And it's not something you have to establish and always stick to. You can vary it widely, anything you want, as far as how much of the gift. So there's just a short form to fill out with the first 2 items when you establish the fund. And then you can also name your donor advised fund. Like I named mine the Better World Fund. You can name it anything you want. And again, that's another psychological benefit, that you have this fund that is, you can sort of name it after the principles that are important to you, or however you want to think about that. So the donor can recommend grants to any 501c3 organization. There's more than 1 million U.S. charities that qualify as 501c3 organizations under the IRS code. And it can be anything at all, from religious, hospitals, homeless shelters, museums, colleges, theater groups, community centers, sky's the limit. The most frequent question RJ Charitable gets from donors is, whom should I gift to? Which I find odd, because I know like dozens of charities I want to give to. But for those who feel a little unsure or overwhelmed picking an organization or more than one organization, a more general request can be made. So the donor can say, well, these causes are important to me. Like it could be the environment, or it could be women's issues, or it could be healthcare, whatever. And then if they just name those kinds of basic organizations, then the RJ Charitable Board of Trustees will ensure that the gift is used in support of that purpose. So they'll pick through, and they have a really great way of doing due diligence that's going to make donors very comfortable. But they'll ensure that the gift goes to the purposes outlined. So that is a nice option, because so many people, apparently, I've been told, really don't know the specific organizations, or they would feel more comfortable knowing that a major organization like a charitable trust has done the due diligence for them. So the benefits of a donor advised fund is that it's a tax efficient giving vehicle. And it actually, donor advised funds offer many of the same benefits as private foundations, but they are much easier to set up and maintain. What are some of those benefits? Well, when you gift say a mutual fund or a stock, then if that investment has a long-term capital gain, it's appreciated in value over time. When you gift it to the donor advised fund, it's going to be sold and there won't be any tax at all on the gain or on the gift at all. And you're going to get an immediate tax deduction for the full market value of the gift for most assets. And there's not going to be any excise taxes. A private foundation will charge excise taxes. Once you make the gift to a donor advised fund, those assets are no longer part of the estate. So they won't be taxed upon your death, of course. And there's no minimum annual distribution requirement for donor advised fund account holders. So that is really nice. You can give as you wish. There's one little caveat to that, which I'll talk about later, but by and large, as far as the vast majority of donor advised account holders, there's no minimum annual distribution requirement for a particular donor advised fund. So you can use a donor advised fund to help you on your taxes because of that immediate tax deduction. Maybe it's a year when things have gone very well. Maybe you've sold a home or some other asset, and you can use a gift to a donor advised fund, to have a deduction that will help you offset that. There's no capital gains tax on the sale of the long-term appreciated value in the securities. As I mentioned, you're not going to have estate taxes on whatever you put in the donor advised fund. And so really you're getting most of the advantages of a private foundation without the expense. There's no startup costs when you establish the account. And when you invest the assets and you have gains in the donor advised fund or investment income, those are never going to be taxed. And all the record keeping services are provided. You don't have to do anything. So it's so much easier. So to the investment objectives, as I promised. And again, most investment firms have a charitable trust. I use the Raymond James one, and at the Raymond James one, we have 7 options that we can tell people that they can invest in. And each option is going to be already defined portfolio that's going to meet one of 7 objectives. The objectives can be as conservative as money market. So you could put your whole donor advised fund in money market if you are the type of person that just doesn't want to take any risk with these assets. You can invest for income. You can invest for income with growth. You can have a balanced portfolio like a 60-40, partly stocks and partly bonds. You can have a more aggressive portfolio like growth with income. So that would be growth stocks, but some income in there as well. You can have pure growth. And I love this one. You can do socially responsible investing, or otherwise known as ESG, environmental, social, and governance, if you like. So all those options are available. All the donor does is check a box and pick one, and the investments are just automatically managed for them. No hassle at all. And what can you put into a donor advised fund? Well, cash through checks, wires, money orders, whatever, marketable securities, and that includes mutual fund shares. Those are the kinds of assets you can put into any donor advised fund. And then what happens if you want to make a grant, or when you want to make a grant, is that you just simply, there's a wonderful, super easy website, and you can either call your advisor and they can do it, or you can just go online and make a request for $100 or more gift. Any amount above 100 is fine. And you're going to have to pick a 501c3 qualified charity, but don't worry, because Raymond James Charitable and any other charitable trust is going to do the due diligence and just double check that it is a 501c3 charity. Once in a while, I'll get a notification that says, you know what, this isn't charity in good standing, 501c3, so we can't make that contribution. So that's good that you're not solely responsible for that, but you have backup. And with RJ Trust, it only takes, believe it or not, it's so fast. Once you put in the application, I want to give to XYZ charity $500. Here's the name, here's the address, here's the phone number. RJ Trust takes 1 to 5 business days to get that grant approved, and then the check goes out the next day after it's approved. Now, I do admit November and December are a little busier, so sometimes it can take more like the 5 days, but it's really a fast turnaround. And again, I don't think RJ Trust is unique. I think charitable trusts at other investment firms probably have a very similar turnaround time. So if there's a problem with verifying the 501c3, and we ran into this a lot more during the pandemic when people were working from home. And what I'm talking about is employees of the charity or working from home, we don't really run into it much anymore. But if they take longer to get back to us, that's what's usually going to cause the problem of a little slower distribution of your gift. There are a few restrictions on what you can do because of basically IRS rules for full deductions. So if you have made an existing pledge to an organization, donor advised funds cannot be used to give the grants for that pledge. And this is because, I know this sounds weird, but because from the perspective of the IRS, a pledge has the appearance of a personal debt. So fulfilling that debt would be seen as a personal benefit, and you can't have a personal benefit from a donor advised fund. Strange rule, but that is the rule. And there are some organizations that are private, non-operating foundations that you can't give to, but that's rare that you're going to come across those. And again, RJ Trust would find it if you didn't know and tried to do it. They would find that issue and let you know. And then you can't use the donor advised fund to pay for things that are only partially tax deductible because your contributions are fully tax deductible. So you can't use it for paying dues or membership fees, or maybe purchasing tickets to some sort of benefit, or purchasing things at a silent auction. You can't use it obviously for lobbying or political contributions to campaigns or candidates. But basically, besides those few items, you have lots and lots of leeway. I mentioned earlier that there is one thing I should make you aware of. It's never come into play because Raymond James Charitable as a whole, the average annual payout for Raymond James Charitable ranges from 15 to 20%. And the rule that the IRS has is that an organization like Raymond James Charitable has to at least give a 5% payout. So again, never been an issue with that. It's always been way more. But if there was an issue, and for some reason the payout was lower than 5%, Raymond James Charitable would go to people who have donor advised funds and haven't given 5% and just say, you know, we need to meet this threshold, and would you like to make a gift this year? So that's really the only circumstance in which there would be any requirement. And then it's really more of a request, because as they would go around and make these requests, they'd get a lot of people to say yes. So not every person would have to say yes. So with that, I'm gonna wrap up and just say, I would love to answer any questions that people have. I can be reached. My email is Sacha, SACHA, at Millstone Evans Group, MILLSTONE EVANSGROUP.com. So Sacha at millstoneevansgroup.com. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have, and I would be more than happy to engage with you. Thank you so much for your time.